Struggling with messy, complicated DAX formula that leave you scratching your head every time you revisit them? I've been there too, especially in my early days of writing DAX. But I found a way to make them so much easier to understand, and today I'm going to show you a better way to write advanced DAX formula that aren't just powerful, but also clean, easy to read, and simple to debug. Trust me, this technique will save you tons of time and frustration, so stick with me and you'll level up your DAX skill in no time. Hi, my name is Lynn. I'm a senior data analyst, and welcome back to my channel where we turn messy data into actionable insight. This video is a part of my data analytics roadmap series where we help Excel property, a growing property chain, analyze their messy timesheet data. So far, we've laid a strong foundation by setting a clear analysis objectives, learning the fundamental concepts in Power Pivot and DAX. Now, it's time to take that knowledge and apply it by writing advanced DAX formula the right way. If you haven't seen the previous videos, I highly recommend to start from the beginning to get the most out of today's sessions. As we're getting into writing complex DAX formula, let's start by reminding ourselves some of the key business rules to guide us further in the analysis. Then, I'll walk you through the techniques for writing clean, readable, advanced code. And finally, I'll share a quick tips on how to quickly format your existing DAX code for better readability and easy debugging. Before we dive in, make sure to download the data file with the link in the description so you can follow along. There's also a timeline in the video description where you can jump to a specific section if you need to. Please feel free to pause, rewind the videos as needed. And don't forget to like the video if you find it helpful and subscribe to my channel for more insightful tutorials. Ready to write DAX formula that's wow? Let's dive into it! Previously, we created the date measurement, holiday, sickness, and workday. Today, we continue with the time measurement, that is the overtimes and the work hours. And finally, the compliant days, which is the date measurement that depending on the time condition. These measures are quite complex to write, so I prefer to write the DAX within the Power Pivot data model interface. So let's open the data model. So go to Data, Data Model, and Manage Data Model. Alright, so we're here in the Power Pivot Data Model window, and this is the timesheet table. And we're going to use the information here to calculate the overtime, work hours, and the compliance day. First is the overtime, which is approved by the store manager, and it can only be recorded in quarters such as 15, 30, and 45 minutes, and so on. So the overtime is simply the sum of the overtime column. Now format the measure. Next, we're gonna calculate the work hours. This one is a little bit complicated, so let's remind ourselves with some business context here. So let's go to the store table. In here, we have the information that each store is open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's 9 hours per day. And each employee is entitled to 1 hour's break. That means that the working hours is 8 hours per employee per working day. That's the plan. However, in reality, exactly 8 hours working is barely happens. The work hours is defined as the difference between the clock out and the clock in time, and they are very likely to be more or less than 8 hours. So when working hours is more than 8 hours and there is no overtime approved by the store manager on that day, the working hour should be recorded as 8 hours. In short, we will be interested in calculating the work hours including the overtimes and the work hours excluding the overtime. Alright, let's write some complicated DAX formula. You have the option to use calculated measure or calculated column when writing DAX measure. Due to the complexity of the formula, and we're not working with a large data set, I'm gonna go with calculated column. Now double click on the add column and rename the column to work hour and hit enter. The moment you hit enter, the formula bar is activated. You click here to expand the formula bar. I'm gonna make the formula even bigger so we have some more space to write our formula. All right. Now, there are several steps that we need to take here. First, we're gonna need to calculate the actual hours. That is the difference between the clock in and clock out time, taken into account 1 hour lunch. Second, we're gonna need to adjust the actual work hours to maximum 8 hours according to business route. Now, if you're working in Excel, what will you do? You would calculate the difference and then use the nested if function to adjust the condition, and your formula will become unreadable by the time you finished, like this. So let me show you some tricks when it comes to writing such complex DAX formula while keeping your DAX code clean, professional, and easy to read. Now, the first trick is to put a clear comment on your DAX codes. You can use the 2/ to start your comment. So I'm going to put here the description of the 2 steps that we will be calculating. That's the first step. And then shift enter to enter a new line. Now, the second step, these comments will not affect the formula. They're only here for documentation purpose, and they will help you to know what the formula is about. The second trick is to use variables to break down your code, especially when you have to reuse the same formula repeatedly multiple times later on. So the syntax of the variable would be the word var and then the variable name. I'm gonna call this work hour and then equal. Then now you can write your measure. So what we want here is the difference between clock out and clock in time. Now this is in time, so to convert to hours, you need to multiply with 24 hours and then adjust with 1 hours of lunch. So that will be our work hours. Make some more space here. Now, in order to get the results, what we need is to put a return syntax at the end of the formula. And we need the variable name to return. And that's the work hours variable right here. And hit enter. And you can see that our formula is calculated in this calculated column. So now we need to adjust any record that is more than 8 to become 8 maximum, right? So that comes to the second variable. So var, and I'm gonna call this variable adjusted work hour equal. Now here I want the if function. So if the work hours is greater than 8, then we want to return 8 hours. If not, then we'll return the work hours. Right, now hit enter. As you can see, there's nothing changed yet because we are returned the work hour and not the adjusted work hour. So I'm gonna need to put the adjust back on, and now hit enter. We see that the formula worked as expected. Now just quickly check. I can see that there's a -1 here, so let's see what that is. So you can see here clock in and clock out time doesn't have any value because this is holiday and sickness, and because we use the -1 here, and that's why it's returned the -1 hours here. So we have to adjust our formula to restrict the status to work day only. So let's do that. So I'm gonna put this into a nested if function. So if the status column is equal to working, then we execute this code. If not, I want it to return 0 and hit enter. Now let's check our formulas again, and it worked. It returned 0 here for holiday and sickness. As you can see, although our DAX formula is quite complicated, but with the use of clear comment and variable, it is now much easier to digest. So do keep in mind this approach when writing DAX codes, especially when your formula are getting very long and complicated. All right, so now we have our work hours column created. We're gonna calculate the actual work hour, exclude the overtime. So this is the measure, so the syntax will be column equal, then your calculation, that will be the sum of the work hours column. And hit enter. Now make this a bit bigger so we can see. And for the actual work hour include overtime, what we're gonna do? So we're gonna simply add the overtimes on top of the work hours. And because now we need the calculation on two column, so we cannot use sum, we're gonna have to use sum x. So quickly change the name, column equal, sum x. What is the table we want? That is the timesheet table. And what is the expression? That is the sum of the overtime and the work hours. And we have our work hours measures calculated. All right, now for the compliance day, it is defined as the day that the employee worked according to the agreement of 8 hours. So you can see here that employees 1 worked less than 8 hours on the 4th of January and on the 6th of January. And that is not compliant with the business plan. Okay, so now we know what compliant days is. How do we calculate it? Easy, right? Now that we have the work hours column telling us which day should be classified as compliant and which one's not, we can use calculate to modify the count condition of the status count measure. All right, so I'm gonna type here actual compliance day, column equal, and we use calculate. What is the expression? That's the status count. And what is the condition that we want here? We want work hours to be greater or equal to 8, close bracket, then hit enter. And we have our results. All right, now that we have all our measure created, let's quickly format them. So I want the date, 1000 separator, no decimal. And for the time, I want them to be formatted 1000 separator, and 2 decimal is fine for me. So we're done here in the Power Pivot window. Let's head back to Excel and add our measure in the calculation sheet. Back in Excel, we can see that the timesheet pivot table has all the measure that we just created here. For this pivot table, I'm gonna add the actual compliance day, and then I'm gonna make the second pivot table to add all the time measure and adjust the width a bit. And we've successfully calculated all the metrics that measure the actual employees absent, attendance, and overtimes. These measurements will help us in performance evaluation later on. Now that we know how a proper DAX formula should look like, let's take a moment to revisit some of the formula we've already written and improve their formats. This way, when we come back to this project in the future, we'll be able to quickly catch up on what has been done. So let's head back to Power Pivot Data Model interface. For the timesheet table, except for the work hour calculated column, which is derived from a very complex formula, the rest of the measures over here are pretty straightforward and easy to read. So there's not much to be done here. Let's move on to the employees table. We have the average X age measure here, which is quite long and very hard to read. So let's try to format this measure and make it cleaner. Right now, we only have few measures, so it's manageable. But imagine that you have hundreds of poorly written measures like this, then documentation them is certainly become a chore. So to speed things up, we will use a tool to help us with the process. Here's what you need to do. Copy the entire complex code that you need to format. Open your browser and go to daxformatter.com and simply paste your DAX codes and click Format. That's it. Your formula is automatically cleaned up and is now much easier to read. You can even tweak the settings to fit with your preferred style. So go to Setting. You can insert a space every time your formula starts, or if you prefer not to have the space, like this, you can adjust it as well. You can even break the formula even further with short line. Here you can see that each component within the formula become one line of code. Personally, I prefer a long line format, so let's switch to that. And now simply copy the newly formatted codes and go back to Power Pivot and paste it again here. Hit enter. And just like that, we've cleaned up our formula in no time. Alright, since we're already here in the employees table, let's take a closer look at the age column. As you can see, the age data is very granular. There's too much details, which make it harder to draw insight from. So we need to group this age data into a broader category like age group to make the analysis more meaningful. And because the age group is a flag, it is best to use calculated column for this. So now the question is, how are we going to classify the age group column? Normally in Excel, you would need to use a nested if function like this, right? But as you can see, the syntax can get very messy and it's really difficult to follow. So let me show you a much cleaner approach. We're going to use a different function, the switch function. This function is perfect when you need to classify data into different categories based on multiple conditions. Let me show you how. So first, let's add a calculated column and call it age group and hit enter. Now the formula bar is activated. Now I'm going to type in switch, open and close bracket, shift enter to enter the new line. So the first argument of the switch function is the value or an expression to evaluate. So I'm going to type here true. By using true, we're telling DAX to check each of the following conditions in that order and stop when it finds the first match. So the first condition you want to check is the average age. I'm going to use the average age measure. We want to test if that average age is less than 20. If this is true, we want to return 20 minus. Now to the next condition, again, the same structure. So I'm just going to simply copy and paste. If the average age is less or equal to 25, then we want to return the category 20 to 25. Now repeat the process for the age group 25 to 30. And finally, if none of the condition is met, we want to return 30 plus. By using switch, we avoid writing a lot of nested if statements, making the formula easier to read and manage. Let's check the results, and it's looked pretty good. Now we don't need the age column anymore, so we can either delete the column completely from the model or simply hide them from the client tool. I'm going to go with the second option because we're not working with the big data. All right, let's add this age group information into our Excel sheet. Simply close the Power Pivot data model window and back in Excel in the General tab, I'm going to make a copy of this pivot table. Now I want to know the employees distribution per age group. So let's kick the gender out and add in the age group in the row dimension. And we have our age group distribution information created. Today, we focus on writing advanced DAX formula while keeping the code clean and easy to read. You've learned how to break down complex formula into smaller steps using variable and add comment for clarity and easy debugging. But writing efficient DAX formula is just one part of the puzzle. So far, we've been working with a single table only, but how do we get multiple tables involved and how do we make them communicate with each other? In the next video, we'll dive into data modeling and table relationship. You will learn how to build a strong data model that allows you to work more efficiently and handle larger data sets. Master this and you will unlock the full potential of Power Pivots. Thank you for watching. If you find this video helpful, please give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episode in our data analytics series. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave them in the comment below and I would love to hear from you. See you in the next videos.